Saturday, January 27th, 2018, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Before I go on, I'd like to say that I'm apolitical. I'm for very small government, no political parties really, the rule of law, the defense of individual rights, the right to life, liberty, and property. So I'm not defending left or right here. I think that's a big mistake. The left-right paradigm, it just keeps individuals divided. Society as a whole is made up of individuals. So I do not agree with the collective mindset of left and right. So I'd like to make that clear. And I want to talk about a book I read years ago. This one here. The Secret History of the American Empire. Economic Hitmen, Jackals, and the Truth About Global Corruption by John Perkins, who was an ex-CIA guy working all over the world, especially Latin America. And I'll just briefly tell you what this book is about. And you make up your mind later about what's going on these days. Well, he was saying that the CIA and the big corporations, they go around the world defending American corporate interests. And whenever countries in Latin America, for example, try to infringe on American corporations over there, they go in there, try to change the leadership. They bribe the leaders. And if they're successful, fine. And if they're not, they try to instigate a coup to topple that leader. And if the coup's not successful, they go ahead and kill the leader or get rid of him somehow. You know, you can think of Allende in Chile, all the coups in Latin America, South America, Brazil, 1964. So what they do? Noriega in Panama. And the basic, the other thing he talks about is how the IMF and World Bank work together with the big corporations to basically give these huge loans to these poor countries. And how do they succeed in giving huge loans that these countries know they're not going to be able to pay back? Well, they bribe the leaders, and that's why you've got these corrupt leaders, because the US, CIA, World Bank, IMF is bribing them to take these loans for the banks. And once these countries collapse, what do the banks do? They go in there and buy all the real assets, the wealth of the country, for pennies on the dollar. So that's what this book is about, and I highly recommend it. And why am I talking about this today? Well, because I think this is coming home to roost. These economic hitmen and jackals, they don't care about nationality or countries or, all they care is about profit and buying cheap assets. And there's been a lot of talk about how President Trump is going to make America great again, how he's going to, how the stock market is almost gone up 50% according to President Trump. He was speaking in Davos yesterday. And I'm not criticizing anyone here, I'm just giving facts. And he made a big deal, of course, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, that he cut the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%, which is a big cut. And he noticed that they're giving, a lot of big corporations now are giving bonuses to their workers, like up to $3,000, which is probably the price of a hotel for one night in Davos. So big deal, President Trump. I know it's a lot of money for some, but for you guys, it's just like change. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a socialist either. I'm for free markets and small government, and I'm against a corporatocracy. But that's what happens when you have big government. Corporations and government get melded together. But one thing that I found really interesting is looking at the U.S. debt clock So it's usdebtclock.org, and I'm sure loads of you have looked at that. And usually we focus on the national debt there on the top left-hand side, and it says 20,617,000,000,000, and it's moving up really quickly. You got the gross domestic product there below on the right. That's trying to keep up as well. It's 19,666,000,000,000. The debt to GDP ratio, though, is 104.83. You know, I think the debt is going to keep moving faster than the GDP, personally. We had the GDP number this week for the latest published report, and it was a lot weaker than expected. I think it was 2.5% instead of 3%. And I was reading as well, one of the analysts on Wall Street said if they hadn't taken down the savings rate as much as they did, the GDP would have been less than 1%. So they can always tinker with the data. But the most interesting thing that I saw in this usdebtclock.org website, and I'd seen it before, and I've noted before, like if you look you've got U.S. federal tax revenue, $3.3 trillion, right? You've got income tax revenue, 1.6 trillion. Payroll tax revenue, 1.17 trillion. So you've got almost 2.8 trillion of income tax and payroll tax. So that's the individual worker in America. And then you go to the top right-hand side there, and you got corporate tax revenue, 314 billion. And, you know, I did some back of the envelope, and it literally is an envelope, back of the envelope calculations. Corporations are paying 9% of total federal tax revenue. And yet they've gotten a corporate tax rate cut from 35% to 31%. Compared to the individual American worker, it looks like the corporations are getting away with murder. You know, they're part of the 1%. The big CEOs, they're getting paid millions and millions. You know, even for resigning. You know, here in the UK, for example, they keep getting their bonuses, and the same thing happens. You know, at Wells Fargo a year or two ago, this person resigned just before a scandal, and she kept her bonuses or something. So you have that, you know, 9% of the total tax revenue is corporate tax revenue. If you think about it, it looks like corporations who have benefited from this QE, money printing, zero interest rates for the last 10 years, if you look at the inequality, you'd think they'd have to pay, you know, oh, we need to bump that up to 20%. Let's keep, or, you know, not even raise the corporate tax rate, but drop, you know, the taxes for individuals, and make and cut government, and make the corporations maybe not pay more, but pay more proportionally. Am I saying that Donald Trump is in the pocket of the corporations? It could be. Is all the talk about draining the swamp and you know, fighting the globalists, because the globalists are these big corporations who are in charge of making the laws of the countries. You know, they could, you know, the big corporations are the banks, the pharmaceuticals, the military industrial complex, the big technology companies. So they're getting a huge break from this tax reform. You know, you look at the cuts for individuals, it's like, you know, from 22%, you know, like the lower tax brackets, I think the 10% tax bracket, which is like up to $10,000, that stayed at 10%, but, you know, the threshold was gone up by $200. Some of the tax rates have gone down from like 23 to 21. It's just a tiny little cut. And what are they going to do? And also, you know, they're getting paid more. These bonuses, are they going to be paying? They're going to be paying taxes on these bonuses as well, aren't they? That they're getting the $1,000 here, you know, or $3,000. Is that what Donald Trump has been hired to do? To basically pump up the United States with huge amounts of debt and then pull the plug so that these economic hitmen can come in like vultures and take over the United States? I don't know, but I listened to that speech he gave in Davos. It all sounded very good about putting America first, but don't forget he was speaking in front of the corporate globalists. You know, why was he there? And he never mentioned the word debt, not once. And in my opinion, that's the biggest cloud or biggest problem hanging over the world economy is debt. But never mentioned it once. So there you go. Did the U.S. corporations really need the huge tax cut that they got? Not really. They pay almost no tax already in the States. They only pay 9% of all federal taxes. So it will be interesting to see, you know, if all the stuff we hear about, you know, about fake news and, you know, Russiagate, drain the swamp, lock her up. Is this just an act? Is this just a distraction while the globalists come in and actually take over the global economy? It will be interesting to see, but it doesn't look good. And just follow the money. You see, that's all you need to do. Did U.S. corporations really need that huge tax cut? So controversial, I know, and Trump, you know, has done some things that help the average American. He has you know, he says that unemployment is the lowest it's been in years, but we still got over 90 million people out of the workforce. I don't think much has changed since Obama. The GDP rate under Obama wasn't great, but it's not great under Trump either. And he called the stock market the mother of all bubbles before he got elected, but now it's not a bubble. It's because he's doing great things for America. Well, he's doing great things for corporations. So let's keep an eye on it. And so if you enjoyed this video, please like, share it, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't, and also make sure to follow me on steemit.com. I highly recommend steemit.com. It's a social media website on the blockchain. And you can follow me on Twitter as well, of course. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.